Welcome to the Hunting Beast Report, a live video podcast with Dan Infalt and host Jeremy Gillespie.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Stealth Outdoors. The off-season's a great time to rehab your gear, so head on over to Stealth Outdoors at www.stealthoutdoors.com to pick up some climbing stick wraps, cam buckle covers, platform cable wraps, or stealth strip rolls for all of your miscellaneous silencing needs. Today's show is also made possible by Hunting Beast Gear, innovators in mobile hunting gear and the designers of the Beast Sticks and Beast Stand. Check out the latest products at www.huntingbeastgear.com. And now, on to the podcast. All right, welcome back, everyone. We're live today. We're joined, as always, by Dan Infalt, Ashley Covert, and we got special guest Sam Soholt. If I could talk today, Sam, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, appreciate you joining. We're going to give you a chance to introduce yourself here in just a minute, but before we do that, Dan, you got the internet all fired up today with a post on Facebook about the 80s and 90s and the hunters and experts then were better than the influencers today with $1. So. First of all, what prompted that post and talk about the feedback you got from that?
Yeah, I don't know. I was just thinking about, I was seeing a whole bunch of stuff popping up on my screen with these guys that, really are just starting hunting, and they're doing all kinds of seminars, they're doing podcasts, they're doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and they have no experience. And, that wasn't really meant to fire people up, but I had about 7, maybe 8 people who took it personally, like I was targeting them. And it's funny because I don't even watch any of their shows. You know what I mean? It wasn't really targeting anybody. And it wasn't meant to target somebody. It was meant to kind of boost them into thinking about what they're posting, because they're kind of looking like fools and they're not really helping people. The best thing to do if you want to have a platform or podcast, I wasn't saying don't do it. I was saying just be honest and be, humble, instead of starting out with this giant ego and, you shoot one deer and you post the 7 tactics on how you're going to kill bucks like that every year for people, that have shot 10 times what you've shot. So, you can still have content, you still do things and be honest and humble, you don't have to start out at the top. That's what it was meant to be, but it was kind of went crazy.
Yeah. I think last I checked before we jumped online, there was like 200 comments and a lot of likes and stuff. So yeah, definitely got people's attention. But speaking of people that make content, Sam, that's what you're all about. So for people that don't know you already, give us a background. And I did some reading and research. I knew a lot about you from YouTube already, but I didn't know all the details. So take us back to maybe 2010, 2011, when you started at Midwest Whitetail, which a lot of people probably don't know about.
Yeah, for sure. I'm Sam Soholt. I have been a professional photographer and videographer, among a few other things, since 2010, 2011. So almost 15 years now of at least trying to learn everything I possibly can about the photo world and video world. But I was a student at North Dakota State University, and Dan, speaking of being overconfident and with not a lot of knowledge about deer hunting, I'd picked up a bow I'd started archery hunting fall of 2010, and I shot a little buck November 10th, and then I shot a much bigger buck to me, like a little over 130 on the November 18th. And I wouldn't say I felt like I knew what I was doing, but my confidence level and just how fired up I was about hunting in general was through the roof. And that confidence led me to cold call and cold email every possible hunting show. I think I emailed info@theoutdoorchannel.com. I was sending my resume. I was like, I'm getting my MBA at NDSU right now, blah, blah, blah. Well, lo and behold, Bill Winke emailed me back and was like, we're always looking for interns. And so that was kind of how I ended up getting an internship in the hunting industry. And boy, did I went down there and learned how little I actually knew about a lot of things, about cameras, about managing pro staff, about hunting in general. But felt like that gave me a pretty solid start, being in the tree every day, twice a day for basically from mid-September until the end of December, mostly that fall. So just, kind of got that whitetail thing ingrained in my blood. But yeah, so after Midwest Whitetail, moved to Colorado. My brother owned a backcountry hunting store and archery pro shop. And so, he chose college based on learning how to elk hunt, went to Wyoming, opened up the archery shop in Colorado. And then, so, I got the initiation in the whitetail world from all the guys at Midwest Whitetail, Bill Winke and the interns and everybody was working there full time. And then I went west, and my brother, like full on trial by fire, like threw me in the mountains and, taught me how to pack a backcountry backpack and live for 7 to 10 days in the mountains. And so, in the span of 2 years, I got to, probably spend more time than most people get to spend in the woods, in their entire life. I got to pick up a lot of knowledge there, and then just kind of snowballed that into a photography career. Worked for my brother's shop, created a bunch of YouTube videos for him, mostly like gear, like overview type stuff, because they were selling gear online and a few hunts and different things like that. And then that ended up landing me a sales rep job. So I moved to Bozeman, and I was a sales rep in the hunting and fishing community, selling everything from ARs to fly fishing reels to, you name it. Like, it was everything in between. And that didn't last all that long, because I randomly met a guy in a coffee shop and got hired to go film a bear hunt. And so dove back into filming, and that led to filming for Coast Guard Alaska. And just kind of like Coast Guard Alaska, met somebody and started filming a bear hunting show for the History Channel. So lived on Kodiak for like 6 months. and then that, led to meeting somebody that hired me to do my first ever professional photo shoot for Remington Firearms. And then from there, it was I just kind of looked at it as every chance I had to meet someone new in the industry, whether it be an editor or a writer or, somebody, a marketing person at one of the companies. I just introduced myself, followed up with emails, went to SHOT Show, went to ATA Show. And then just kept opening up that pipe a little bit more and more and more until I had a steady stream of, photo gigs and video gigs kind of honestly, really all over the world. So I got pretty lucky in the time that I came up into it.
It's pretty cool how kind of with all of us, I mean, me too, when you look at my career and the direction it went, it's like luck and skill collide. If you have skill somewhere and you get the luck to collide that with the opportunity, it just creates the path.
Yeah, I think, and then just being willing to see the open door, and there was a lot of stuff like, when I moved out to work with my brother, obviously, moved from college down to Midwest Whitetail, scary transition, right? You're very comfortable in your own skin, very comfortable in that community, move 700 miles away, like to all new people, all new location. And then you figure that out. Well, then I moved again to Colorado, like 6 months later, and then all new people, all new other, brother, but like other than that, all new situation. And then the sales rep job took me to Montana. That was terrifying, because then I was like all on my own, no family, no support system, no, set up anything. And then the big one was going to Alaska. And I was just like, I landed on Kodiak. Like, I think I probably lost like 10 pounds just like while I was flying up there, just because I was so nervous. But just, yeah, like you said, like figuring out, having the passion, having a little bit of knowledge, and then that luck, and then just walking through that open door instead of, maybe just being too nervous to take the chance.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. That's a great story for anybody that's listening about how to network. And I mean, Dan says luck. Sure, there was some luck in there, but a lot of persistence too. Making your own luck, emailing everybody, following up, expanding your network when you can. And it sounds like I've listened to some of your other interviews that anytime an opportunity came up, you said yes, which is a big thing too.
Yeah, I was definitely a yes man. It was like, there would be times where now a good friend of mine, Ben O'Brien, he would go through the Rolodex of photographers and whatever that they had for either a Yeti shoot or Peterson's hunting or whatever. And then he'd be like, if their top 3 guys couldn't go, he'd call me and be like, hey, can you be here on Tuesday? And it'd be like Thursday. I'd be like, sure, let's do it. And then, who knows where I'm flying to. But that was definitely part of, kind of furthering my career in the photo and video world.
Yeah. And one of the other stories that I heard about you around that time was somehow you ended up on a moose hunt with a famous podcaster. What's the story there?
Yeah. So that was one of those, like, hey, can you be here on Monday? kind of things. Like I had been filming all fall for different people and had just been out on a photo shoot for Remington, had met the editor for Peterson's at the time, Mike Scobie. He's now at Field Ethos. But met him, back in the day, I gave him like a PDF of like my portfolio, just like a bunch of random photos kind of jumbled together. And he sent me an email. I was like, hey, you got time for a call, real quick? And it's like, sure. So hopped on a call with him and Ben O'Brien. And they're like, can you be here on Monday? We're doing a cover shoot for our Meat Eater episode, or like issue, like Eat What You Kill kind of thing. We're taking Joe Rogan up on a moose hunt. Can you be there? And I was like, at the time, I knew Joe is like, he's the Fear Factor guy, right? Like he had a podcast, and before I went, I listened to one with him and Cam Haynes, and I think he interviewed Jim Shockey maybe, and I just like listened to some of that just to kind of get a feel for a little bit more who he was or whatever. But yeah, flew up to British Columbia and spent a week with Joe and Ben and Mike, the outfitter. It was later season, so it was early, like late. I think it was November 1st through the 9th was the hunt that we did. And so, you're not hunting rutting bulls. You're basically driving around, checking clear cuts, looking for groups of moose. But yeah, spent a week with him, and it was towards the end of the trip, like it was looking like we were not gonna shoot anything. And we're driving, and the outfitter goes, there's a bull, and like slams on the brakes, and we're all like, where? And he's like, it's not very big. And Joe's like, I don't care. So we we get out and sneak back down, and Joe ends up shooting this forky moose. But the whole thing was like, the whole concept of the hunt was, okay, we're gonna go try to kill a moose for sure, like that's the plan. But the size of it doesn't really matter, because the whole thing we want to promote is like the meat and cooking and like what you're taking home. And so we did a whole half day of different photos with him with backstraps, him with quarters in front of a barn, like kind of on that hill. And then the one they ended up choosing was kind of him skylined with the trees in the background with that moose quarter over his shoulder. And yeah, that definitely helped. That was a big stepping stone in my career for sure.
Yeah, I imagine that's people that haven't seen it, that's a very cool photo. And I mean, I'd say borderline iconic now. So if you're going to be taking photos of somebody, Joe Rogan's not a bad person to be taking photos of.
No, he's a good one to shoot photos of.
So let's talk about what were your big takeaways, or that those stories span obviously the course of several years. We got a lot of people that like to film their own hunts too. And obviously you're a professional at that. What'd you learn during that time? Give me 3 or 4 of your key takeaways, what you learned from Midwest Whitetail and, filming for Peterson's and everything.
Yeah, I think the top one is story over everything. So it doesn't matter how good, of your cinematography is. You can spend $100,000 on cameras. You can have the best lenses. You can do all this stuff. You can be the best color grader, editor, all those things. But if you don't have a good story, it's really hard for people to engage and relate to your content. So I think that was the biggest thing. And, at Midwest Whitetail, we were dealing with a lot of SD footage, a lot of very amateur, it's all volunteer pro staff. And so I'm like, begging people to send me footage every week. And I have a funny, real quick, I have a funny story about that. I edited the Michigan show the year I was there. And in an entire season, my crew at the Michigan show killed 2 bucks, neither of which were with a bow, and neither of which was in Michigan.
Sounds like the Michigan I know.
It was rough, but we had a great time, and I learned a ton. But definitely, like, just focusing on telling the story and having it be relatable to the people who you want to see it. So that's one. 2, there's the best camera. Everyone, I get a lot of messages like, what's the best camera? And the best camera is the one you already have, because if you're not creating stories, if you're not creating content with your phone in your pocket or with a GoPro or with the old camera that you have, buying a $10,000 camera isn't going to make you start shooting more photos. It's not going to make you start taking more video. If you don't have the passion to go create and storytell and do those things, don't go spend the money. Go spend that money on extra tags, take some extra clips on your phone, go enjoy yourself. So yeah, 2 is just, don't spend the money right away. Figure out how to tell a story with what you got, and learn, because you'll know as soon as you outgrow whatever equipment that you have, you'll know when you outgrow that. And then 3, I think just don't film, don't be doing it for, I mean, it sounds so cliche, but just don't be doing it for likes. Don't be doing it for, the content. Don't be doing it for outside dopamine hits. All of that is lovely. It's all a casino, right? The social media thing is just, it's just flashing lights and, it's like the nice little, like, open it up. Oh, somebody liked it. That's a nice little, like, hit to the brain, but if that's all you're chasing, you'll never grow. Because most of what's on social media now, my buddy and I have a good analogy for it, and he came up with this first. He's like, it just feels like junk food, right? It's easily digestible. It tastes good in the moment, but you forget it immediately. Like, there's all of the really, really short stuff. It's not a lot of impact. It's not like people aren't like searching out old short form content, like going way back. And so, yeah, I think that's probably the best 3 tips I have.
Dan, go ahead, because I know that echoes a lot of what you do.
Yeah, I was thinking of self-filming, because that's basically what I do. I get into situations where you can't have a cameraman. I could probably have a cameraman along on maybe 1 out of 5 hunts, because the way I hunt and where I hunt, and some of them would probably drown. But you got any tips for people self-filming?
Yeah. I think the self-filming thing, like, like a long time ago, I jumped into the mirrorless world, and cameras with interchangeable lenses and stuff. And when I started to try to self-film, like, that is just, it just doesn't work to have that type of a camera. So I found myself going back to a much less expensive standard video camera for any time I'm trying to self-film, because it's just because of the efficiency of it. You're not switching lenses. You're not dealing with you're not dealing with a big bulky piece of equipment. You can kind of streamline it down a little bit and gather all of the shots that you need, especially if you're filming a deer come in, trying to change the zoom, change the focus, do all these things on the fly. It's okay if you're the camera guy, but if you're self-filming, it's just a giant nightmare. And I personally found myself just like not enjoying the hunt at all when I was trying to do that. So just a less expensive video camera with a decent zoom is the answer on that.
Yeah. For me, when I first started with the self-filming, I had such a hard time, because I came from TV back in the 90s, filming for TV, where you had to have a cameraman. Everything had to be good. And, you had to, zoom in, get a good, clean picture, clear focus and stuff. And you just can't do that while you're trying to kill an animal.
Right.
So it took me a while to figure out. You just had to zoom all the way back and use editing software to blow it up a little.
And pull it in.
Just clean it up the best you could. And what really, for my kind of content anyways, what was really important is what you said before, which resonated with me, the story. So I'm really, trying to tell a story, not necessarily show a pristine kill. It's not, it wasn't as much the entertainment factor for me. So that helped me a lot with this moment.
Yeah. And I think the big thing about telling a story is a lot of times, like, you don't even need a really good kill shot if the rest of the story is really good, because people, they feel it. Like, even if the deer walks off camera, or, you don't get the lens turned around or whatever, people can feel that emotion because they've been with you the entire time. And so, I think it takes a little pressure off in the moment when you can spend more time focusing on actually just, doing what you need to do.
That's a hard thing too, because a lot of people, especially ones starting out, are not good storytellers. They start to film clips and then they don't know how to put it together later. It's something you got to learn, that you're telling the story as you go. And I don't know how you'd give somebody a tip on that, but they need to learn that whole tell the story as you go thing.
There are a lot. I don't have the book names of the books right off the top of my head, but there are a lot of good, like, books on actually telling better stories. And so look those up, Amazon, books about storytelling. Like, that's a good way to do it. But when it comes to like filming, clips to tell a story, I think the biggest thing is that when I was trying to like preach to the pro staff that I was managing for Michigan and Minnesota or whatever back at Midwest Whitetail, is like, here's the thing, like if you're doing an interview, right? If you're telling the story of the hunt, like if that's how you're editing it together, every time you talk about something, you need to try to have a clip of what you were talking about. And so that's a good way to do it, is like while you're hunting, kind of like be working on that in your head. Like, okay, I'm gonna do an interview about this, or I'm gonna sit down and like light it well, and like I'm gonna narrate this. Think about like what you want to show people, and make sure that you have a plethora of clips that kind of showcase what you're talking about. And early on, you get like film a lot. Like that's the biggest thing, is like film all the time. Like go out there, if you hunt, go out, you know, hunt for 3-4 hours or whatever, come home with an hour and a half of footage, you know, film the leaves, film the tracks, film yourself, like do more interviews, that do updates than you think you should do, like all of that type of stuff. And as you go, you'll start to, like, when you go back in and edit, you'll start to like learn your style, and you'll start to learn like, okay, I didn't need to take quite as many clips of this. And you can start to cut those out going forward. But right away, just film it all and figure it out, and then go back, and then you have enough to actually cut. And then one thing that I learned the hard way is shoot clips that are long enough so you can actually let them ride a little bit. Early on, I caught myself doing a lot of like 4 to 7 second clips, and then it was just like I'd go to edit, and it's like, oh, I could have used like an extra 3 seconds on this one. So now I, like when I'm filming B-roll and like getting extra shots or whatever, like I'm constantly counting to myself or watching the screen on the back, like, okay, I got 25 seconds. I got 30 seconds of that. I got, you know, that helps a lot when you go back and put it together.
Yeah. A lot of times too in the field, this happened to me, even if you've got better audio equipment, your audio comes out terrible, because like in Montana, if it's 30-mile-per-hour winds, even if you got the dead cat on and stuff, like you're getting terrible audio. So if you've got more B-roll, then you can narrate after the fact over top of that. And if you don't have those clips, it's pretty hard to narrate over them.
Yeah. Yeah. And very hard to recreate those clips.
Yeah. Well, let's shift gears a little bit here, Sam. One of the things that you're real well known for is your public land bus. And I believe that was, maybe you acquired it in 2017 or early 2018, somewhere around there. So I'm going to screen share. I've got some pictures of the bus from a blog article here, and this is the interior. So talk us through one, kind of the build of the bus, 2, why you did it, and 3, what you learned.
Yeah. So when I was working with my brother, him and his business partner, we'd all talked about acquiring some form of school bus, and they were going to use it for like a mobile archery shop. And then we thought about, like, okay, we could use one for like, it would sit out in front of the shop and be a big, billboard for marketing. But from those conversations in like 2013, 2014, like the idea just kind of always lived in my head. And every time I saw a school bus, I would see the potential of what it could be, and not, like just a yellow bus going down the road.
Sure.
And so the end of 2016, I was coming off a good year of photos and video stuff, and was kind of looking for that next big project, and kept going back to the bus. And, finally, like my brother ended up finding it on Craigslist. And so I bought it New Year's Eve, 2016, bought it in Colorado, and then parked it behind his shop for a little while. And then when I went back out there, he helped me rip all the seats out. And then I drove a blank skeleton of a bus back to start working on it. But the whole concept kind of really flowed together. I kept trying to figure out what story to tell with the school bus, just a guy hunting out of a bus. Sure, that's cool. It's everyone can relate to a school bus. Everyone rode a school bus at some point. But just a guy out in a bus, like it falls pretty flat after a little while. Well, at that time, there was a whole bunch of legislation that was basically threatened to be passed, which was transferring the federally managed lands to the states, and they were marketing it as a states' rights issue. And I'm all for states' rights. I would rather have the states have more control over decisions, rather than the Fed, except when it comes to the 640 million acres that are managed by the Fed, because long story short is the states cannot afford to maintain and manage that much ground. And it's a fast track to privatization. So if they transfer the lands, and you can see this in history, every time they've either given the states land or transferred the states land, it ends up being sold or privatized or blocked off fairly quickly. So this was all happening at the same time that I bought the bus, and I called my brother while I was driving one day, and I was like, what if I use it as a billboard to raise awareness about all of these issues, and then we can raise money to donate back to the organizations that are actually fighting this every day? And that was it. It was like, yep, found the bus, bought the bus. I tried to barter for it, tried to trade him hunting gear, but I eventually talked him down to $3,500. But it's a 1993 Bluebird, and the motor and transmission had been rebuilt 20,000 miles before I bought it. So was riding on a pretty like new rig. And then, just drove it back and started working on it and spent the entire summer of 2017, just like every morning, wake up, make a pot of coffee, go out, curse myself for buying a 36-foot school bus and start cutting boards and laying floor and paint and stuff. And it was a scramble. I did it in about 2.5 months was the whole build. And just lived on coffee and beer and built a bus.
That's awesome. I'd be interested to know too. Obviously, you had some partners with that, and at this point, you'd had somewhat of a reputation, but you weren't all that far into your professional career. How'd you go about the networking and teaming up with those brands? I think people would be interested in learning about that as well.
Yeah. So the year I bought the bus, I basically bought it, and then I went to ATA and SHOT Show like the couple weeks after, and I went to all the brands that I'd been shooting photos for. And I was like, hey, I bought a school bus. This is what I'm doing. This is what my plan with it, went through the whole thing. And almost all of them were like, yes, that is awesome. Like, let's do something. Let's make it happen. And none of them jumped on board that first year. So fully self-funded, spent every dime I had. A lot of time I was running negative balances I was running on credit cards until the next check would come in from a photo shoot that I did. And then just the only company that jumped on board that fall was the article that you were sharing there. I guess, was that from Outdoor Life?
Yes, it was. Yep.
Yeah. So they were the only ones that share. I did a series of videos and photos for Outdoor Life that fall. But that didn't pay anything either. That was just like, I did it to get the word out there. So I just spent the whole year in the bus. And then once all of that stuff came out, and Outdoor Life, this was pretty infancy of like not infancy, but pretty early on in social media stuff when everything had a little bit more traction. When all of that hit, it was when all of my partners that I worked with on the photo side and stuff were like, all right, like, proof of concept, we get it, we know what you're doing, like 2018, let's go. So 2018 was a much better year for people helping me out as far as like living on the road. I hired one of my best friends to come film me for the whole fall in 2018, and so he was my good luck charm. It was probably the best year of hunting I've ever had. But basically lived in the bus for 2.5 years and raised and still raising money for conservation. But it has been one hell of a journey.
No, that's amazing. And if people haven't watched, you've got a YouTube channel, Soholt Brothers. That's your main YouTube channel, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, so people can check out the bus video. There's the 2018 season. You did a lot of videos. I think you shot your first antelope in Montana that year, correct?
Sure did. Yeah. Little tiny sucker. I was so pumped. Yep.
Yeah, I try to get our audience all the time to antelope hunt because I think spot stock archery antelope is one of the funnest hunts there is. And I would have never thought that when I lived east. Everybody's like, oh, I want to go hunt elk, but antelope, it's an action species. They're out all day and you can get a lot of stalks and drive around, you screw one up, you go do another one, and it's just a lot of fun.
And the best part about antelope is if you shoot one, they taste better than almost anything else. Like, it's amazing meat. And two, the amount of rust that you get to buff off going into the rest of the year is second to none, because you're
100%.
literally stalking all day. And so like when you go hunt elk or hunt deer or whatever, like, you're ready, like you're fully engaged by then.
Yeah, I've got the archery antelope tag this year, and I say it all the time. That's my favorite thing about it. It's action, and you get all the rust off. You forget your rangefinder, or your quiver, or whatever. You knock it all out in antelope, which I don't care as much about, and then pretty sharp going into the deer and elk.
Exactly.
I'm going to share one other screen here. I think, let me make sure. Yeah, this is the right one. So you kind of had Public Land Bus 2.0, which was another cool build. You guys bought a conversion van, and talk to me about that, because you guys did quite a bit of work on this one, and maybe why
Yeah.
you went from the bus to the van and lessons learned from that project.
Well, I would say pretty normal transition to go, just downsize a little bit. So,
Sure.
and other things, heat, AC, cruise control, 4-wheel drive, like all very positive benefits to going to a van instead of having a bus. But yeah, this project was super cool. We still have the van. We will be getting rid of that at some point. But we still have the van. But yeah, it was a really cool project because my brother and I got to do it together, and he did a ton of the build because we bought it in the fall of 19. I drove it to Pennsylvania. They put the 4-wheel drive system on. I drove it back out and then took it back out to Colorado. And then COVID hit. And so nobody was traveling, nobody knew what was going on. So it was just parked out there in Colorado. And so Josh just started hammering on it. And then I went out for couple weeks, and then we did a ton of work to kind of finish out that interior on the whole thing. But yeah, it was it's been a very fun project. And if nobody's ever looked at a 4-wheel drive van, like you can go anywhere, you can store a ton of gear in it, and like obviously ours is 100% like hunting purpose built. Like you have the front 2 seats, and then the rest is like living gear storage, like the deck slide out, a weapon slide out, like we made it so it was like that's all it does.
Yeah.
But yeah, turned out pretty cool.
Yeah, if people haven't watched that video, I highly recommend it. The deck part especially, I kind of cracked up when I watched it because the top drawer of the deck system, when it slides out, it's got foam cutouts with rifles and bows and stuff in there. Super cool. Looks very tactical.
Yeah, it was like our van bat cave, like it's like the wall in Boondock Saints when they walk into the caged room and it's just guns and knives and everything.
Yeah. Before we got online, we talked about you're a family man now. You're married and I believe expecting. Hopefully we can share that.
Yep.
I guess I did. So yeah. But you've slowed down a little bit, but you're still actively involved in conservation. And one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about specifically, because I think I'm painting with broad strokes here, and I'm talking mostly about myself, but sportsmen, even very passionate sportsmen, tend to skim over the conservation stuff or maybe not put as much importance on it. So what are some active topics in conservation right now that you think people should be looking out for? And obviously you've done a lot of this personally. What's a good way to get involved and make a difference?
Yeah. So one of our biggest projects we do every year is the easiest way to get involved in conservation, hands down, and that is simply go buy a duck stamp. We do a project called Stamp It Forward every year where we get individuals and companies to donate money, and then we spend 100% of that on federal duck stamps, and then 98% of that money has to be spent on wetland conservation. So it's a good like entryway for people to like learn a little bit more about how conservation funding actually works. But the hot topic right now, there's a lot of big stuff happening right now. A couple concerning things. One is ballot box biology, and this is happening in several states, but the big one right now is in Colorado. So the first one was because there's not a law in place that says, even though the North American model of conservation says that decisions should be based on science when it comes to managing wildlife, that's not a law. That's just a tenet of how we have, taken care of our wildlife in North America. But in Colorado, they played on emotion, and first they got enough signatures to put wolf reintroduction on the ballot. This was like 5 years ago, and that passed by a narrow margin, but it passed. And so against like a paper written by the head of the Game and Fish in Colorado, or the Colorado Parks and Wildlife, which said that there's already wolves and we need at least another decade before we would bring any more wolves in because it was going to cross-contaminate the natural Mexican wolf, which was coming up from Arizona. That's a whole other conversation. But anyway, they got it on the ballot to vote wolves back into the state, which is not good. It's I think apex predators deserve to be on the landscape, yes, but without a management plan, it doesn't make any sense. And so that was the first one. And now they are trying to get, and I don't know if it's on the ballot for this fall, but they're trying to ban trophy hunting, but also ban mountain lion and bobcat hunting in the state of Colorado. And there's a lot of cats in Colorado and a lot of cats that live close to cities in Colorado. And again, they're just playing on emotion. It's people who are disconnected from the food chain, disconnected from how the natural world works. And so that's something to be looking out for in your home state, because if it passes in Colorado, where they ban mountain lions, they ban predator hunting, it's not going to be hard, because then they'll have precedent, at least in a state. It's not going to be hard for other states to follow suit and get signatures and spend lots of money and lots of time tugging at people's heartstrings and saying that all of us are evil and we're doing the wrong things. And even though we're the ones that have propped up wildlife populations for, generations. So that's one thing to be on the lookout for. The other thing that I haven't heard as much about lately, I think probably because just the legislative sessions aren't happening right now, but there was a few states that were changing the way the game fishing parks or parks and wildlife, whatever it is in your state, DNR, they were changing the commissions, and they were appointing people or getting people on the commission that are either anti-hunting or have no idea about hunting, or I don't think it was Kentucky. They were going to lump it under the agriculture committee, and they got that stopped. But it's worrisome, because if you have a bunch of people who are basically fighting against everything we're fighting for, that are in there making the decisions based on and making big decisions on wildlife and habitat and all the things that we want to protect, that is a big issue. So you need to be on the lookout for that. Like if your state starts to try to kind of weasel in people who are against hunting and fishing and trapping, and putting those people in positions of power that can make big decisions, it's going to greatly affect our way of life. And then I think the last thing is, we collectively as hunters have the ability to stop all this, because there's a lot of us. But there was a list, and you can Google it, but it showed a list of all of the registered hunters and gun owners that are not registered to vote, kind of across the country. And it is staggering. So if you are a gun guy, if you're a hunter, if you're a fisherman, if you are a sportsman or woman, make sure you are registered to vote. And then you can, you stay up to date on these things through different, find a conservation organization that fits for you. If you like pheasant hunting, if you like deer hunting, if you like the more general, the non-sexy, Sportsman's Alliance, which is sending us all of the updates on bills and stuff that are trying to be passed, or things we need to vote for or vote down. Register to vote and go vote either for or against that, or contact your representatives and say, I'm calling on behalf of my local chapter of Delta Waterfowl, and there's 100 members in this county, and we are going to all vote against you, and rally people to vote against you if you pass this bill that is bad for sportsmen. So it gives us the power to take all this back and vote for things or against things, depending on what we need to do, if you're actually registered and participate at the polls.
No, super great overview, and I want to add a few things to that. So I volunteer in Montana for, like you said, a conservation organization, and I want to state right off the bat, I know not everyone has the time to do that, but I want to mention two things. One, I volunteer for the Mule Deer Foundation in Montana. Mule deer numbers in Montana and across the West are hurting bad. So I decided that's where my time would be best spent. So I do fundraising. I work the annual banquet, things like that. And that takes time. And I know some people don't have time to do that. The other thing that I think is easy for people to do is follow a conservation organization on social media. Like I follow Montana Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. And the reason I do that is because I don't have time every day to read the websites or the state sites about what's going on. But Montana Backcountry Hunters and Anglers does a great job at summarizing the issues. They tell you what's going on, what kind of BS laws are getting proposed, who to contact, and when the votes are. So they make it super easy if you want to be involved with minimal legwork yourself. So doing stuff like that, I think for the average guy, that is very attainable, and it's a small time commitment.
Yeah, it's a very small lift when you look at it that way. It's, like you said, follow along on social media, but also sign up for their newsletter. So howl.org does a good one. BHA does a great one. Sportsman's Alliance. Honestly, if you were following those three, you're going to get the information that you need. And most of them have state chapters and will tell you things that are happening to you locally. So that's really good advice.
Awesome. Dan, you got anything you want to add?
I was just thinking about, like local issues. You can't even get people to get involved in local issues. Like in my area of Wisconsin, or DNR, they got a biologist in each county, and they make a lot of decisions. And it seems like they purposely keep them secret to keep there from being turmoil. And it seems like there's nothing you can do to stop them. And people get mad, but they won't go to spring meetings. They won't speak up. They all chatter. But like this year, they sold one of our favorite hunting properties off. We didn't even know. I was scouting it a month before season last year, and went out there opening day. And as I'm walking on the property, I'm looking at my Spartan Forge app, and the property has a person's name on it. Suddenly, a month earlier, it didn't. So I called the warden up, and he goes, "No, that's public property." I got him on my phone.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "It's got somebody's name." He's like, "Whose name?" And he goes, "I know that guy. Let me make some phone calls." So he calls me back. He goes, "Yeah, they just sold it." He goes, "I don't know why. Everybody uses that property." I'm like, "I don't know either." He says, "Call the biologist up and ask him why." So I called the biologist up, and he basically starts screaming at me about politics, saying I voted for the wrong guy. He goes, "I follow you. I seen who you voted for. That's why this stuff goes down." I'm like, "Well, why do you keep it a secret?" He just hangs up on me, won't answer my phone calls. And, it's one property after another. Then they come into like major properties, and they use our money to put these huge trails for hiking through there that nobody uses. They took one property, made it into a dog park, and it's a swamp. Nobody walks their dog out there, and it's like, why is this stuff going on? Why can't we do something about it? Why does it have to be kept a secret? But it's so hard to get people involved. And if
Right.
they'd get involved, we'd keep our rights, we'd keep our properties. Because what people aren't understanding is we literally are the bosses of those people, and they're acting like they're our bosses in a lot of cases.
Yep. Yeah. And I think for anybody listening, conservation is not sexy, and it's a pain in the ass most of the time to be involved and volunteer and speak up and do these things. But it really just takes being a little bit more informed and trying to figure out like you said, when those spring meetings are happening, even if you can't go, whatever, send one of your buddies, like if they can go, and then have them relay all the information to you so you can, make a phone call or send an email or a text, whatever. You can get a hold of representatives any way, shape, or form. But it just takes just a little bit of making, like if we want to protect this for future generations, it's going to take all of us to be just a little bit more involved on the front end to do all of these things.
No, great advice. Appreciate that. We're going to take some questions for the audience, but two things before we do that. Where can people find you on social media? And I know we mentioned the YouTube channel, but go ahead and plug that again, and any other platforms you're doing. And then after that, what are your plans for this fall?
Yeah. So at Public Land Tees is the best place to follow. Do a lot of like conservation talking there and work. And then $5 from everything we sell, we donate back to different conservation groups, habitat, public access, you name it. So we've been since 2017, we've raised and donated a little over $300,000 for different conservation initiatives. So that's a good place to follow us. And then, Soholt Brothers YouTube channel. And then my personal one is just at Sam Soholt. But
no, yeah, phenomenal the work you're doing for conservation and the awareness. So that's why we wanted to have you on, and the filming tips. Appreciate that too. So, Ashley, if you're out there, let me unhide Ashley here, get her back on. And hey, there she is. Let's see if we got audio today. We always struggle. Oh my God, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Oh.
We've been having issues, so it's good to see it sorted out. So yeah, I'll turn it over to Ashley, and she'll field some questions.
Alrighty.
Cool.
So Steve asked, in conservation of states, is there anything they all seem to lack in or mismanage?
I think that's state by state basis. And you're also going to have different feelings from different hunting groups, right? So, if you're an upland hunter, you might feel that the state mismanages prairie or grasslands. And if you are a deer hunter, you might feel that the state mismanages how they, manage the deer herd, whether the state's managing for money or managing for quality or so I don't know if there's like a blanket thing that states like have trouble working with, but I think if there was one, it's managing the quality of the experience for hunters across the board. I think that's probably the hardest thing because they're dealing with lagging indicators, right? So if you have a really bad winter and a whole bunch of deer die, well, then they can't react fast enough to drop the number of tags. And so a bunch of deer get killed. Well, then the next year, people's experience goes way down. And so you have to give, like, as hard as it is to give the government any leeway, most of the time, anytime I've talked to biologists and people who are actually trying to manage, they are trying to do a good job. And so give them a little bit of rope when it comes to stuff like that. But yeah, I would say it's going to be state by state and really depends on what you love to chase.
Buckslayer asked if you prefer duck hunting or deer hunting. And I'm going to go a little bit further and ask why.
So I grew up waterfowl hunting. Like that was my everything, from when I was 10, going when my older brother was old enough to go the youth hunt. And then I chose college based on duck hunting. And so I'm very into it. And then obviously raise a whole bunch of money for that, for duck stamps and whatever. And then, but it's hard. Like when I am duck hunting, that is my favorite thing to do in the entire world. And when I'm deer hunting, that is my favorite thing to do in the entire world. So I find myself, it's very easy for me to shift gears. And there's no way I could just choose one. If I had to, I would say the community aspect of duck hunting and watching mallards pile into a cattail slough, like with your dad and brother and uncle or whatever. And like, I think, if I was going to do one hunt over and over for the rest of my life, like I would want that experience, but it's a tough choice.
I'm still convinced that one duck stamp should have won the shark one or whatever it was.
I know.
The really ridiculous one.
Yes.
I'm still so mad that was not the winner.
Yeah.
I feel
that
like
one
they
made
need
me
to bring it
laugh
back one
really
year.
hard.
Yes. Every year it pops up every year and I'm like, it should have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Buckslayer also asked, have you ever tried filming a duck hunt with a shot cam and GoPro or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I've used GoPros pretty extensively, and then I've never owned like one of like the Tacticam like barrel or like a shot cam like on the gun, but I have a bunch of buddies that do, and they use it more for like helping their shooting, and then like sending clips to friends or whatever when they shoot like Crush 3 when they come in or whatever. I think you can get some really cool shot angles with like those POV type cameras. It's hard to tell the whole story because everything's super wide angle. It doesn't give like the viewer a lot of like it doesn't make them feel like they're there very much. I think you can use it creatively to like help tell that story, but just using those is tough.
Gotcha. Brian Griggs asked, what kind of fuel mileage does the bus get?
Miles per gallon. So it's funny you ask that. So most of the time it was hovered around 8, which is better than I thought it was going to do. If I had it, there was a couple times where I got all the way up to 10. I had like a really good tailwind and it wasn't like pushing it real hard. I'm driving 55, 60. But I had a guy on YouTube ask me that and I answered, and another guy answered back that basically called me out and was like, that is not possible. Those buses do not get that good of fuel mileage ever. I was like, maybe I don't know how to do math, but like, I filled up and then I filled up again and did the calculation. But no, it hovers around 8. So not very good.
All right.
I want to jump in line real quick, Ashley. And maybe Sam knows the answer. I know a little bit of the answer, so we'll see. Uncle Lou, Stealth Outdoors, he says, what conservation organization does the best with monies raised? Ducks Unlimited, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, Pheasants Forever, or any of the other great conservation organizations?
So Pheasants Forever is the most money to the ground. So they have a different, like how they run their organization is different. So when a local chapter of Pheasants Forever hosts an event, they get to spend the money raised locally. And that's why Pheasants Forever has such a giant volunteer base, because when you go to work a banquet or when you go to do something local, like, okay, every dollar that comes in, we get to spend on, building a prairie or opening up a public hunting area or whatever in like where we live, rather than sending all that money back to the national chapters. I think Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation is right up there. I mean, the way that they have structured like their membership and then leveraging the money they get from big corporate donors and whatever, you know, and then using that to like have the money make its own money, so then they can spend that on big projects. I think Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation does a really good job. But it's really, you know, if you're asking which one to join, just find one that, you know, plays to your heartstrings and join it and get involved, because you'll end up joining 5 or 6 of them by the time you're done.
Yeah, quick plug for the Mule Deer Foundation. They do send money to the national organization, and then it's redistributed. But we get information every year, you know, from our meetings, and they're putting 88 cents of every dollar earned back into the field. So the overhead,
which is amazing.
Yeah, because it's really grassroots. Our local chapter is all volunteer, and in the state, I believe there's only one paid position. So a lot of the money is going back to the field.
Yeah, and I know Mule Deer Foundation they're doing a giant project with the National Forest System for a bunch of like mule deer habitat stuff too. So there's a lot of funding that's happening through the Mule Deer Foundation right now.
Alrighty, you got anything else for him, Jamie? Or can I hit the last question I have wrote down?
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I jumped the line there.
Oh no, you're good. You're good. So Hunter615 said, lightest, most compact option for a camera to film hunts.
Lightest, most compact option. Gosh, I don't know. I mean, Dan, you could probably answer this better than I can. I carried a Canon XA40, which is not super small and compact, but pretty good for quality. Yeah,
I like the Sony Handycams. I mean, this is probably about, I don't know, they probably go about $1,200 right now. If you bought a new one, this is an older one. But that's pretty compact, where you still got pretty high quality film.
Right.
Yeah, Sam, I'm sure you back me up on this. For people that haven't filmed, and they're getting pretty affordable now, a 4K camera is a great way to go, because if you're going to edit after the fact, you don't have to be zoomed right in how you want it to look. You can zoom in up to, 50% or 100% and still have 1080 footage.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So something that films in 4K is a good idea.
If you can get something 4K, that's a great idea, especially for when that deer or whatever is coming in. You know, you can widen out a little bit so you can focus on doing your job, and then, like you said, punch in after the fact.
Yeah, makes it a lot easier when you're self-filming.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah. Got anything else from the audience there, Ashley?
There's a couple more. Farrell said, since taxes from guns, ammo, licenses, etc., are supposed to go to furthering hunting opportunities, is there any audit actions or measures to ensure it is spent efficiently?
Yeah, so they're talking about the Pittman-Robertson Act. And so the way that works is there's a 10% excise tax on guns. I think, guns and ammunition. I think it's 11% on, or maybe it's the other way around, 10% on handguns, 11% on guns and ammo. They added archery equipment to that list. And then you also have that on the fishing side. So the way that works is all that money goes into a giant fund. And then based on your state's size, population, and project list, the state the states have to apply to use those PR dollars. And so it's everything from, shooting ranges, and I think on the fishing side, it's, boat ramps and all that kind of stuff. But the states are able to do massive habitat projects, and typically they have to fund them up front. And so the state will pay, let's say it's a $20 million project. They'll pay that whole $20 million to do the big project, and then they can apply for Pittman-Robertson dollars, and they can get, I think, up to 80% of the project funded. And there is a list, like it's all public, basically in every single state handbook for hunting and fishing. It'll show you, like, okay, the state received, $112 million in Pittman-Robertson dollars. It was spent on these things. And if you get real nerdy about it, you can go find the spreadsheet where it shows you exactly where all that went. But pretty amazing, like, conservation funding mechanism. And there's a lot of people that are mad about it because it makes guns and ammo and things cost a little bit more because it's taxed at the manufacturer level. And so we get that cost passed on to us. But without that, we wouldn't have the billions of dollars that have been spent on habitat and access and shooting ranges and hunter safety. And we would have to find all that money somewhere else rather than just all of us kind of pitching in together. But yeah, you can go find the dedicated, like where those funds are actually dedicated.
Awesome.
Do we got
one
time
more?
for another, Jeremy?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
Yep.
one more. Hang on. It's hard for me to read off of here. Sam, what conservation project that you worked on and donated to was the most meaningful and why?
So one cool one that we did was it was for our Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. It was called the Falls Creek Project, and our donation of $5,000 was just like there's been two of them. So RMEF, we donated to the Falls Creek Project, and ours was just a drop in the bucket, right? But they bought a chunk of private land and then turned it into public as a basically an easement for people to walk across. But it opened up access to 26,000 acres of public land. And I went in there and hunted fall of 2019 just to go experience it. And it is one of the most incredible places I've ever been. So just being like a very tiny part of that for Josh and I and Public Land Tees to be able to like be a small part of helping open that up, it felt just, and obviously we're not the ones, that we're pitching in some of our own money, but it's people that are supporting us. So we got to do this like community, help the community fund this project, and that was really cool. And then I'm trying to think, I had a second one. Everything we've been able to do with the duck stamp, and we've bought, I think I added up, it's like $202,000 worth of duck stamps since 2019. And so just knowing that 98% of that money has been spent on different wetland projects or, waterfowl production areas, the refuge system, I think that, definitely hits home growing up on the Prairie Pothole region, and just knowing a lot of that money goes back there is pretty cool.
Yeah, and that's an important point you made about the land acquisition. For people that don't know, a lot of times these conservation organizations, specifically out west, RMEF, Mule Deer Foundation, they're supplementing funds for state agencies to help buy these private lands. And, Montana, I think of a couple projects off the top of my head where they did exactly that. They bought what were private pieces, turned them public, and then those pieces linked larger chunks of what were previously landlocked public. So great way to spend your money and your time if you want to get involved in some of those organizations.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's all we had for questions. I'm going to turn it over to Dan, but before I do, I want to say, Sam, great to have you on, super informative, and just appreciate your attitude, your content, and what you're doing for hunters and, all the conservation efforts.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. Just, I love nerding out about all this stuff. So it was fun.
Yeah. Appreciate all you do. If anybody wanted to support you in a small way too, they could go to your site, that Public Land Tees site, and buy a shirt. They've got some really cool shirts. I might have to get one for one of my videos. Appreciate you coming on. Really appreciate what you're doing. A lot of us are admittedly real lazy towards conservation. I've always wanted to do something to like protect our, at least locally, public lands. It's just so hard with all else I got going on. Earlier we were talking about, even a little before we went on and after we went on, about that post I made up this morning about, these young guys and what their focus is on with their platforms and stuff. Wouldn't it be nice if more of them made a platform kind of like what you're doing and try to, help the whole community? That's something a lot of people would get behind. I'm just too committed with 3 different jobs between owning a tree stand company, owning Hunt and Beast from the filming side of it. And I actually work a full-time job on top of that. It's just hard for me to fit it in, but I always feel guilty about not doing things like you're doing them. It's really incredible what you're doing.
Well, I think I got lucky and I kind of dedicated my time to this type of stuff. So you don't have to go as deep as I've gone in it all. But small wins are big wins over a long period of time. So just, I think anybody listening or anybody that ends up watching this, if you make it all the way to the end, just join a conservation group, contact a representative, it takes 5 minutes, maybe less. Just be a little bit more involved. And I think, if we all do just a little bit more, like, it'll be pretty easy for us to steer the ship rather than just constantly course correcting.
No, great points. And we're going to wrap up, but I will put links to Public Land Tees and Sam's YouTube channel in the episode after we wrap up. So if anybody is watching this and wants to check those out, we'll put links to those. And thanks again, Sam, for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Sam.
we'll catch everybody next time. Thanks.